The smell of stale coffee and dusty papers filled Mr. Carter's office when I walked in that Tuesday morning. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped my purse handle, and I wondered if everyone could tell how nervous I was. Dad had only been gone for 2 weeks, and it still felt surreal to be here, about to hear his final wishes. "Sarah, honey, sit here next to me," Mom said, patting the empty seat beside her on the brown leather couch. Her voice was hoarse from crying, but she still maintained that elegant posture I'd always admired in her. Margaret Mitchell never let anyone see her completely broken, not even now. I settled into the cushion, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. The whole Mitchell family had gathered: aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since the last family reunion. But it was Jessica's presence that made my stomach churn. My older sister sat across from us in a high-backed chair, her arms crossed, wearing that black Chanel suit she'd bought specifically for the funeral. Everything about her screamed legitimate heir, from her perfect blonde highlights to her designer shoes. Mr. Carter cleared his throat and adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been the family lawyer for over 20 years, and I remembered him from when I was just a kid, always serious but kind. Today, however, he looked particularly grave. "Before we begin," he said, his voice carrying the weight of formality, "I want to express my deepest condolences to all of you. Robert was not just a client but a dear friend. His passing is a tremendous loss." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and I reached over to squeeze her hand. Dad had been everything to me. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me to school on my first day, who stayed up all night helping me with my college applications. The fact that he wasn't my biological father had never mattered to him, and for most of my life, it hadn't mattered to me either. "Now," Mr. Carter continued, opening a thick manila folder, "let's proceed with the reading of Robert Mitchell's last will and testament." The room fell silent except for the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. I could feel my heart beating in my ears as Mr. Carter began to read the formal language of the will. Dad had left the house to Mom, of course, along with a generous sum for her retirement. There were smaller bequests to various family members. His brother got the antique watch collection, his sister received his mother's jewelry. Then came the business assets. Mitchell Construction had been Dad's pride and joy, built from the ground up over 30 years. I held my breath, knowing this was what everyone really wanted to hear about. "To my daughter Jessica Mitchell," Mr. Carter read, "I leave 40% of Mitchell Construction Company, along with the position of Chief Operating Officer, trusting in her business acumen and dedication to continue the family legacy." A small smile played at the corners of Jessica's mouth. She'd always been the business-minded one, the one Dad had groomed to take over the company someday. It made sense. "To my daughter Sarah Mitchell," Mr. Carter continued, and my heart skipped, "I leave 40% of Mitchell Construction Company, along with the position of Chief Creative Officer, recognizing her invaluable contributions to our design innovations and her deep understanding of our company's heart and soul." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. I felt my face flush with shock and emotion. 40%? The same as Jessica? I had worked part-time for the company during college and had suggested several design improvements that Dad had implemented, but I never imagined he valued my contributions so highly. "The remaining 20%, Mr. Carter went on, "goes to my beloved wife Margaret, ensuring she maintains controlling interest and final say in all major decisions." Jessica's smile had vanished. Her face was stone, but I could see the fury building behind her eyes. She'd expected to inherit the majority of the company, maybe even all of it. The fact that I, her adopted sister, had received an equal share was clearly not part of her plan. "Additionally," Mr. Carter read, "Sarah inherits the Lake House property, as it has always been her favorite place and where she finds her greatest peace." That did it. Jessica shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "How can she inherit the same as me? She's not even a real Mitchell. She's just the adopted one." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face burn with humiliation as every eye in the room turned to stare at me. The way she said "just the adopted one" made it sound like I was some kind of charity case, a temporary guest who had overstayed her welcome. "Jessica!" Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "How dare you?" But Jessica wasn't finished. She turned to face the room full of relatives, her voice rising with each word. Come on, everyone's thinking it. She's not blood family. She doesn't deserve an equal share of what Dad built. What Grandpa started. What our family created with our own hands. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of everyone. I'd always known I was adopted. Mom and Dad had told me when I was 7, explaining it in the most loving way possible. They'd said I was chosen, that they'd prayed for me and that God had brought me to them. But Jessica's words made it sound like I was an outsider, an interloper who'd somehow tricked my way into their family. That's enough, Jessica, Mom said, her voice shaking with anger. Sarah's my daughter just as much as you are. Your father's too. How can you say such horrible things? Because it's the truth. Jessica shot back. She's been playing the sweet little adopted daughter act for years, worming her way into Dad's good graces. Well, congratulations, Sarah. Your manipulation worked. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like jelly. Jessica, I never. Save it, she snapped. We all know what this is. You've been working your angles, haven't you? Poor little orphan Sarah, so grateful for the crumbs the real family throws her way. The cruelty of her words took my breath away. This was my sister, the girl who'd taught me to braid my hair, who'd let me sleep in her room during thunderstorms when we were kids. Now she was standing in front of our entire extended family, reducing me to nothing more than an unwanted burden. Mr. Carter was trying to restore order, his voice stern but calm. Mrs. Mitchell, please. This behavior is completely inappropriate. But Jessica ignored him, her attention fixed on me like a predator who'd cornered her prey. You know what? Fine. Take your equal share. Take the lake house. But don't think for one second that makes you a real Mitchell. Blood is blood and you'll never be one of us. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of everyone's discomfort, their awkward glances and whispered conversations. Some relatives looked sympathetic, others seemed to agree with Jessica, and a few just looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. I wanted to run. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get out of that room, to escape the humiliation and the pain. But something deeper held me in place. A stubborn pride that Dad had instilled in me, a refusal to let Jessica's cruelty break me completely. Are we finished here? I asked Mr. Carter, my voice somehow steady despite the chaos in my chest. He looked uncomfortable, glancing between Jessica and me. Well, actually, there is one more thing. Mr. Carter's words hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica had finally sat down, but her posture remained rigid, her face flushed with anger and something else. Was it fear? The rest of the family sat in uncomfortable silence, probably wishing they were anywhere but witnessing this family implosion. One more thing. Mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked exhausted, aged 10 years in the span of 10 minutes. Mr. Carter nodded, reaching into his briefcase with deliberate slowness. Your husband gave me specific instructions about this. He said I was only to open the second envelope after the main will had been read and, well, after any family disputes had been aired. He pulled out a cream-colored envelope, much smaller than the one containing the will, but somehow it seemed to command more attention. My name was written on the front in Dad's familiar handwriting. For Sarah, my beloved daughter. Jessica's eyes fixed on the envelope like it was a snake about to strike. What is that? I honestly don't know, Mr. Carter replied. Your father sealed it in my presence 3 months ago and instructed me that it was only to be opened today, in front of the entire family, and only if... He paused, looking directly at Jessica. Only if someone questioned Sarah's rightful place in this family. The room went dead silent. Even the grandfather clock seemed to stop ticking. Jessica's face had gone pale, and I saw her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the arms of her chair. He knew, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Dad knew this would happen. Mr. Carter nodded gravely. Robert was a very perceptive man. He loved both of his daughters deeply, but he was also realistic about family dynamics. Just open it, Jessica said, but her voice lacked the venom from before. Now she just sounded scared. Mr. Carter looked at me. Sarah, your father's instructions were very clear. This is addressed to you, but he wanted it read aloud to everyone present. Are you comfortable with that? I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to snatch the envelope and run, to read whatever Dad had written in private. But another part, the part that was still stinging from Jessica's public humiliation, wanted to face whatever truth was in that envelope head-on. "Read it," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Mr. Carter carefully opened the envelope and unfolded a single sheet of paper. I recognized Dad's handwriting immediately, the same careful script he'd used to write me notes for my lunchbox in elementary school. "My dearest Sarah," Mr. Carter began, and I felt tears prick my eyes just hearing Dad's words. "If you're hearing this letter, it means that someone in our family has made you feel like you don't belong. I'm sorry for that, sweetheart. I'm sorry I'm not there to defend you myself." I heard Mom sniffle beside me, and when I glanced around the room, several relatives were looking down at their hands, clearly uncomfortable. "There are things I should have told you years ago, but I was protecting you. I was protecting our whole family. But secrets have a way of eating at the foundation of everything we build, and I won't let that happen to you. You deserve to know the truth." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. What truth? What had Dad been protecting me from? Mr. Carter continued reading. "Sarah, you are not adopted in the way you've always believed. You are my biological daughter." The words hit the room like a bomb. I felt the blood drain from my face, and beside me Mom let out a small gasp. Jessica shot to her feet again, her chair clattering backward. "That's impossible," she shouted. "That's absolutely impossible." But Mr. Carter kept reading, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. "Your mother is not Margaret, sweetheart, though she has loved you as her own from the day you came to us. Your biological mother was a woman named Catherine Reynolds. We worked together at Mitchell Construction in the early days, before the company took off. She was brilliant, creative, and kind, everything I see in you every day." I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. My whole life, everything I'd known about myself, was crumbling around me. "Catherine and I had a brief relationship before I married your mother. When Catherine found out she was pregnant, she was scared. She was young, just starting her career, and she didn't feel ready to be a mother. We talked about it for weeks, and finally she asked me to raise you. She said she trusted me to give you the life she couldn't provide at the time." "This is a lie," Jessica screamed, her face contorted with rage. "Dad would never cheat on Mom. He would never." "Jessica, sit down," Mom said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. "Let him finish." "Margaret knew everything," Mr. Carter continued reading. "She agreed to raise you as her own because she couldn't have children after Jessica's difficult birth. The doctors said it would be too dangerous for her to get pregnant again. When I came to her with you, she said it was an answer to her prayers. She said God was giving us the daughter she'd always dreamed of having." I looked at Mom, and she was crying openly now, nodding as Mr. Carter read. "It's true, baby," she whispered to me. "Every word of it. You were the most beautiful little girl I'd ever seen. 3 months old, with these big brown eyes that looked just like your father's. I fell in love with you the moment I held you." "No," Jessica said, shaking her head violently. "No, this changes nothing. Even if it's true, even if she's Dad's biological daughter, she's still illegitimate. She's still the product of an affair." The ugliness in her voice made me flinch, but Mr. Carter wasn't finished. "I need you to understand, Sarah, that you were not a mistake. You were not the result of some sordid affair. Catherine and I cared for each other deeply, and when she made the difficult decision to let us raise you, it wasn't because she didn't love you. It was because she loved you enough to want what was best for you." "Where is she now?" I managed to ask, my voice cracking. "My biological mother?" Mr. Carter looked up from the letter. "Your father addresses that. He says Catherine moved to California shortly after you were born. She became a successful architect just as she'd dreamed. She never married, never had other children. And she never stopped loving you or wondering about you. Did she ever want to see me?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "Your father says she sent letters every year on your birthday along with photos of herself so you could see what she looked like as she got older. He has them all stored in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. The key is in his desk at home. Letters. Photos. A mother I'd never known I had, who had been thinking about me all these years. It was too much to process." "There's more," Mr. Carter said gently. "Your father wanted you to know that Catherine is sick. She has cancer, and she's been fighting it for 2 years now. She's been asking to meet you, but she didn't want to disrupt your life unless you wanted to see her too." My legs gave out and I sank back into the couch. Mom immediately wrapped her arms around me, and for a moment, I let myself lean into her familiar warmth. She's dying, I whispered. Your father hoped that by the time this letter was read, you would be old enough and mature enough to make your own decision about whether you wanted to contact her. He left her current address and phone number with me. Jessica was pacing now, her hands clenched into fists. This is insane. Even if all of this is true, it doesn't change anything about the will. It doesn't change the fact that she's been lying to all of us her whole life. I wasn't lying. I snapped, finally finding my voice. I didn't know any of this. But Mom did, Jessica shot back, whipping around to face Margaret. You both did. You let me grow up thinking I was the only real child, the only heir, and all along you were hiding this huge secret. Mom lifted her chin, and for the first time since Dad's death, she looked strong again. We were protecting both of you. Sarah deserved to grow up feeling secure and loved, not like some shameful secret. And you deserved to grow up with a sister who loved you unconditionally. Well, that worked out great, didn't it? Jessica said bitterly. Mr. Carter cleared his throat. There's one final paragraph to the letter. The room fell silent again, all eyes on him. Sarah, if you're hearing this, it means you've been hurt by someone who should love you. I'm sorry for that. But I want you to remember that you are a Mitchell in every way that matters. You have my blood, my wife's heart, and my family's name. You've earned your place at that table through 32 years of being the kind, intelligent, creative woman your mother and I raised you to be. Don't let anyone make you feel less than the miracle you've always been to us. All my love, Dad. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there reeling from everything I'd just learned, trying to piece together a new understanding of my entire life. I wasn't adopted. I was Dad's biological daughter. I had a birth mother who was alive but dying. And Jessica had just learned that I wasn't the interloper she'd thought I was. Well, Jessica said finally, her voice hollow. I guess congratulations are in order. You're not just stealing my inheritance anymore. You're stealing my father too. And with that she walked out of the room, leaving the rest of us to sit in the wreckage of everything we'd thought we knew about our family. The days following the reading of Dad's will passed in a blur of awkward phone calls, whispered conversations among relatives, and a silence in our house that felt heavier than grief. Jessica hadn't spoken to any of us since she stormed out of Mr. Carter's office. She'd sent movers to collect her belongings from the family home, things she'd stored there over the years, but she hadn't come herself. I found myself wandering through the house like a ghost, seeing everything with new eyes. The family photos lining the hallway suddenly took on new meaning. There I was at 6 months old, chubby-cheeked and grinning, nestled between Mom and Dad on the front porch swing. Dad's eyes in that photo, they were my eyes. How had I never noticed before? Mom had aged 10 years in the past week. She moved slowly through her daily routines, and I often caught her staring off into space, lost in memories I couldn't access. We tried to talk about what had happened, but every conversation ended with both of us crying and no real resolution. I should have told you, she said for the 100th time as we sat at the kitchen table, nursing cold cups of coffee. Your father wanted to tell you when you turned 18, but you were so happy, so secure in who you were. We kept putting it off. I understand why you didn't, I replied, and I meant it. But Jessica, God, Mom, the way she looked at me. Like I was some kind of fraud. Mom's face tightened. Jessica is hurt and confused. She'll come around. But I wasn't so sure. The venom in my sister's voice when she called me illegitimate had cut deep. Even knowing the truth now, that I was Dad's biological daughter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my family. The easy, comfortable relationships I'd always taken for granted were gone, replaced by something more complicated and fragile. On Thursday, I finally worked up the courage to call the number Mr. Carter had given me. Catherine Reynolds. My biological mother. The woman who'd carried me for 9 months and then made the hardest decision of her life. I must have picked up the phone a dozen times before I actually dialed. What do you say to the mother you've never known? How do you introduce yourself to someone who gave you life but not the life you've lived? The phone rang 3 times before a weak voice answered. Hello. Is this Catherine Reynolds? There was a long pause, and then I heard a sharp intake of breath. Sarah. The hope in her voice nearly broke me. Yes. It's me. Oh my God, Sarah, is it really you? He was crying, and suddenly I was too. Dad died, I managed to say. Last month. And at the will reading there was a letter. I know, sweetheart. I know. Robert called me 3 months ago when he wrote that letter. He said he wasn't sure how much longer he had, and he wanted to make sure you had the choice to contact me if you wanted to. He was sick. His heart. He didn't want to worry you or your mother, but he'd been having problems for a while. The doctor said it could happen any time. This was another blow. Dad had been sick and hadn't told us? How many other secrets had our family been keeping? I'm sorry, Catherine said softly. I'm so sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man, and I know he loved you more than life itself. Tell me about when I was born, I said suddenly. Please. I need to know. Catherine was quiet for a moment. You were born on a Tuesday morning in March. It was snowing, this beautiful soft snow that made everything look magical. You were 3 weeks early and you came so fast that we barely made it to the hospital. You weighed 6 pounds 2 ounces and you had this full head of dark hair that stuck up in every direction. I was crying harder now, but I needed to hear more. You were so alert, she continued. The nurses said they'd never seen a newborn stay awake so long, just looking around at everything with these big, serious eyes. You had your father's eyes from the very beginning. Why didn't you keep me? The question came out harsher than I'd intended, but I had to ask. Catherine was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I was 22 years old, fresh out of college and scared out of my mind. Because I was working 16-hour days trying to prove myself in a male-dominated field, and I knew I couldn't give you the attention you deserved. Because your father was married to a woman who desperately wanted children and couldn't have them, and I could see how much they both already loved you. She paused and I could hear her crying. But mostly because I was selfish and young and stupid, and I convinced myself that giving you to them was noble instead of admitting that I just wasn't ready to sacrifice my dreams for yours. I regretted it every single day for the first 10 years of your life. And after that, I realized that regret was selfish too. You were happy. You were thriving. You had parents who adored you and a sister who seemed to love you. I had no right to disrupt that just to make myself feel better. Sister. The word stung now. Things with Jessica are complicated, I said. Robert mentioned that there might be some family tensions when the truth came out. I'm sorry for that too. It's my fault. It's not your fault that she's... I struggled to find the right words. It's not your fault that she can't accept me as I am now. Tell me about your life, Catherine said. Please. I want to know everything. So I did. I told her about school, about my job, about my friends and my hobbies and my dreams. I told her about the lake house that Dad had left me, how it had always been my favorite place to think and create. I told her about my degree in architecture. And we both cried when I realized I'd chosen the same profession she had. I have something for you, she said when I'd finished. A portfolio of my work over the years. I always hoped that maybe someday you'd want to see what I'd built. Some of the projects I'm most proud of. I'd love that. I'll send it to you. I know this is a lot to ask, but would you consider coming to visit me? I understand if you don't want to. I understand if this is all too much. But I'm in San Francisco and the doctors say... Her voice broke. They say I might not have much more time. The thought of losing another parent, especially one I just found, was overwhelming. But the thought of not meeting her, of always wondering what she was like, was worse. I'll come, I said. Soon. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I looked like Dad. I'd always known that. But now I wondered what features came from Catherine, what parts of my personality were inherited from this woman I'd never known. The front door opened and Mom came in carrying groceries. She took one look at my face and set the bags down. You called her. I nodded. We talked for 2 hours. Mom sat down across from me and I could see the mixture of emotions on her face. Sadness, fear, maybe even a little jealousy. What's she like? She's an architect. Like me. She never married, never had other children. She said she regretted giving me up for the first 10 years. But then she realized I was happy and it would be selfish to disrupt that. Mom nodded slowly. She sounds wise. She's sick, Mom. Cancer. She doesn't have much time left. I know. Your father told me when he wrote the letter. He said she wanted to meet you before. I'm going to San Francisco to see her. Mom was quiet for a long moment and I could see her processing this. Her daughter, the daughter she'd raised and loved for 32 years, was going to meet the woman who'd given birth to her. It had to be painful. "I think that's the right thing to do," she said finally. "You deserve to know her. Are you okay with this?" "Really?" Mom reached across the table and took my hands. "Sarah, you are my daughter. You will always be my daughter. Catherine gave you life, but I gave you everything else. Your first words, your first steps, your scraped knees and broken hearts and graduation day. I was there for all of it. Meeting her doesn't change that. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. More than you'll ever know." That night, I lay in bed thinking about Jessica. Somewhere across town, my sister was probably lying in her own bed, processing the same revelations I was. But while I was planning a trip to meet my biological mother, she was dealing with the fact that the sister she'd resented was actually more of a legitimate Mitchell than she'd ever imagined. I thought about calling her, trying to bridge the gap between us. But every time I reached for the phone, I remembered the look on her face when she called me illegitimate, the way she'd dismissed 32 years of sisterhood in front of our entire family. Maybe some things once broken couldn't be fixed. Maybe some words once spoken couldn't be taken back. But as I drifted off to sleep, I found myself hoping that Jessica would find her way back to us eventually. Because despite everything she'd said, despite the pain she'd caused, she was still my sister. And family, real family, was supposed to be stronger than secrets and stronger than pride. At least that's what I wanted to believe. The flight to San Francisco gave me too much time to think. I stared out the window at the patchwork of fields below, wondering what I would say to the woman who had given me life but not the life I'd lived. Catherine had offered to pick me up at the airport, but I'd insisted on taking a cab to her apartment. I needed time to compose myself, to prepare for whatever emotions were waiting for me. Her building was a converted Victorian in the Mission District, painted a soft yellow with white trim. It looked artistic and welcoming, exactly what I would have expected from an architect who'd spent her career designing spaces for people to live and work and dream. I stood on the sidewalk for a full 5 minutes, looking up at the third-floor windows, before I finally worked up the courage to ring the buzzer. "Sarah." The voice came through the intercom, shaky with emotion. "It's me." The door buzzed open and I climbed 3 flights of narrow stairs, my heart pounding harder with each step. By the time I reached her landing, I was breathless, though I wasn't sure if it was from the climb or the nerves. She was waiting in her doorway, and the first thing that struck me was how small she looked. The cancer had clearly taken its toll. She was thin, almost fragile, with a silk scarf wrapped around her head where her hair should have been. But her eyes were bright and alert and so familiar that it took my breath away. "You have Robert's eyes," she said softly, and then we were both crying. The hug was awkward at first, 2 strangers trying to navigate the intimacy of a mother-daughter relationship we'd never had. But after a moment, something settled between us and I felt her arms tighten around me. "I can't believe you're really here," she whispered. Her apartment was beautiful, high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Architecture books and design magazines were stacked everywhere, and the walls were covered with framed photographs of buildings I assumed she'd designed. "This is incredible," I said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. 30 years of work," she said with a tired smile. "I was going to donate most of it to the university, but now, well, maybe you'd like to have some of it." The thought of inheriting another parent's legacy, this one from a woman I barely knew, was overwhelming. But as I looked around at the evidence of Catherine's career, I felt a strange sense of connection. These were the dreams she'd pursued instead of raising me. This was the life she'd built while I was growing up 3,000 miles away. "Tell me about your projects," I said, gesturing to the photographs. Her face lit up, and for the next hour she walked me through her portfolio. Community centers in underserved neighborhoods, affordable housing complexes designed to feel like homes instead of institutions, a children's hospital with whimsical touches that made sick kids smile. Every project showed the same attention to human needs, the same understanding that architecture was about more than just building structures. "You've done amazing work," I said, and I meant it. "You've made a real difference in people's lives." "That was always the goal," she said. "I thought if I couldn't be a mother to you, at least I could be a mother to communities that needed nurturing." We sat on her couch, sharing tea and the awkward intimacy of strangers trying to become family. She asked about my work, my dreams, my life with the Mitchells. I found myself telling her things I'd never told anyone. About always feeling like I had to prove I belonged, about the creative visions that kept me up at night, about the lake house where I felt most at peace. "I have something for you," she said suddenly, disappearing into her bedroom. She returned with a large box, worn at the edges and tied with a faded ribbon. "What is it?" "Letters. Photos. Everything I wanted to send you over the years but never did. I wrote you a letter every year on your birthday telling you about my life, asking about yours. I had photos taken every year so you could see how I was aging, so you'd recognize me if we ever met." My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon. The box was full of envelopes, each one marked with a year, 1993, 1994, 1995, all the way up to 2024. 32 years of letters I'd never received. "You wrote to me every year?" "Every single year. On March 15th. I'd tell you about my projects, about places I'd traveled, about books I thought you might like. And I'd always end each letter the same way. How? I love you and I'm proud of you and I hope you're happy." I pulled out the letter marked 2024, the most recent one, and opened it with shaking hands. Catherine's handwriting was shaky now, clearly affected by her illness, but the words were clear. "My dearest Sarah," I read aloud. "You turned 32 today. I wonder if you still like chocolate cake with vanilla frosting. That's what I've always imagined for your birthday celebrations. I wonder if you're married, if you have children, if you've found work that fulfills you the way mine has fulfilled me." I couldn't continue. The idea that this woman had been thinking about me, celebrating my birthday from afar, imagining my life for 32 years, was too much to process. "I kept track of your accomplishments," Catherine said softly. "Your father sent me updates occasionally. Your graduation from high school, your acceptance to college, your job at the architecture firm. I was so proud when I heard you'd chosen my profession. Did you influence that somehow? Did Dad tell me about you?" "No. That was all you. Robert was very careful never to push you toward architecture or away from it. He said you discovered it on your own, that you had a natural eye for design and a passion for creating spaces where people could thrive." Just like her, I realized. I'd inherited more than just her profession. I'd inherited her vision, her values, her understanding of what architecture could mean in people's lives. "I have cancer," Catherine said suddenly, as if she needed to get the words out before she lost her courage. "Pancreatic. Stage 4. The doctors say I have maybe 3 months, possibly 6 if I'm lucky." The bluntness of it hit me like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. I've had a good life, a fulfilling career. I've seen the world, built things that will outlast me. The only regret I have is not knowing you." We spent the rest of the afternoon going through her portfolio, and I was amazed by the similarities in our design philosophies. She showed me sketches and plans, explaining her thought process behind each project. It was like looking into a mirror of my own creative mind. "There's something else," she said as the sun began to set over the city. "Something I need to tell you about your father and me." I tensed, not sure I was ready for more revelations. "We weren't just colleagues who had a brief affair," she said carefully. "We were engaged." The words hung in the air between us. Engaged. For 6 months. This was before he met Margaret, obviously. We were young, ambitious, working together at a small firm in Chicago. We thought we had it all figured out. We'd build a practice together, get married, change the world one building at a time. What happened? Catherine smiled sadly. Life happened. Robert got an offer to start his own construction company back in his hometown. I got accepted to a prestigious graduate program in California. We tried to make long-distance work, but we were both so focused on our careers. You broke up. We broke up. It was mutual, or at least we told ourselves it was. But when I found out I was pregnant 2 months later, I realized we'd made a terrible mistake. Not about breaking up. We probably weren't ready for marriage. But about letting pride keep us from trying to work things out. Did you tell him right away? I was scared. I'd already started school and I knew Robert had begun dating Margaret. I didn't want to complicate his life and I didn't want him to think I was trying to trap him into getting back together. But you did tell him eventually. When I was 5 months along, I couldn't hide it anymore. I called him and he flew out to San Francisco immediately. He wanted to marry me, to try again, but I could see he was torn. He cared about Margaret and I could tell he was trying to do the right thing by everyone. That's when I suggested he and Margaret raise you. She couldn't have children and I wasn't ready to be a mother. It seemed like the perfect solution. Were you in love with him? Still. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Part of me will always love Robert. He was my first love, my first real partner in every sense of the word. But letting him go was the right choice for all of us. He had a good marriage with Margaret and she was a wonderful mother to you. I got to pursue my dreams without the guilt of feeling like I was neglecting my child. And you got parents who were ready to love you completely. As I sat there processing this new version of my origin story, I realized how different it was from what Jessica had imagined. This wasn't some sordid affair or betrayal. This was two young people who'd loved each other, made difficult choices and ultimately put my welfare above their own desires. Does this change how you see your life? Catherine asked gently. I thought about it. I don't know yet. It's a lot to absorb. But it doesn't change the fact that Mom and Dad raised me, loved me, gave me everything I needed to become who I am. Good. That's exactly what Robert hoped you'd say. We had dinner at a small restaurant in her neighborhood and I found myself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Catherine was easy to talk to, funny and intelligent and genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. By the end of the evening, I could see glimpses of what our relationship might have been like if circumstances had been different. I'd like to stay a few more days, I said as we walked back to her apartment. If that's okay. I'd love that, she said, and her smile was radiant despite her exhaustion. That night, lying in Catherine's guest room, I called Mom to check in. How are you doing, sweetheart? She asked, and I could hear the worry in her voice. I'm okay. She's wonderful, Mom. And what she told me about her and Dad, it wasn't what I expected. What do you mean? I told her about the engagement, about the mutual decision to break up, about Catherine's suggestion that Robert and Margaret raise me. I knew they'd been serious, Mom said quietly. Your father told me about Catherine when we first started dating. He said she was brilliant and driven and that they'd probably gotten engaged for all the wrong reasons. Too young, too focused on their careers to really understand what marriage meant. Are you okay with me being here? Sarah, I've had 32 years to be your mother. Catherine has had 3 days. I'm not threatened by this relationship. I'm glad you're getting to know her. Has Jessica called? Mom sighed. No. She's still not speaking to any of us. I'm worried about her, but I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it can't be fixed. Maybe some things are just broken. Don't say that. She's your sister and she's hurting. When people are hurt, they sometimes lash out at the people they love most. She doesn't love me, Mom. She made that pretty clear. She does love you. She's just scared and confused and probably feeling like everything she thought she knew about our family was a lie. After we hung up, I lay awake thinking about Jessica. Was Mom right? Was my sister's cruelty really just fear and confusion? Or had the revelation about my parentage simply given her permission to express feelings she'd been hiding for years? I thought about all the times growing up when Jessica had made little comments about how I was Dad's favorite, how I got away with things she never could. I'd always assumed it was normal sibling rivalry, but maybe there had been deeper resentments brewing beneath the surface. Maybe learning that I was Dad's biological daughter had been the final confirmation of her worst fears. That I really was more important to him, that her place in the family really was secondary to mine. If that was true, then no amount of explanation or apology would fix what was broken between us. Because the truth was, I couldn't change the fact that I was Dad's flesh and blood. I couldn't change the fact that he'd left us equal shares of the company, or that he'd given me the lake house, or that he'd written a letter defending my place in the family. I couldn't change the fact that, despite Jessica's attempts to diminish me, I really was a Mitchell in every way that mattered. The question was, would she ever be able to accept that? Or would she spend the rest of her life seeing me as the sister who'd stolen everything that should have been hers? I stayed in San Francisco for a week, and by the time I left, Catherine and I had built the foundation of something that might have become a real mother-daughter relationship if we'd had more time. We spent hours walking through the city, looking at buildings she'd designed and ones that had inspired her. She taught me to see architecture not just as structures, but as stories about the people who'd built them, the communities they served, the dreams they represented. Every building is a love letter, she told me as we stood in front of a community center she'd designed 15 years earlier. A love letter to the people who will use it, to the neighborhood that will embrace it, to the future that it helps create. I thought about the lake house Dad had left me, about all the summers I'd spent there sketching and dreaming. Maybe that had been his love letter to me. A place where I could always go to remember who I was and what I wanted to become. On my last night, Catherine gave me a small leather portfolio. "These are some of my original sketches," she said. "From when I was just starting out, when I was your age and everything seemed possible. I want you to have them." Inside were dozens of drawings, buildings that had never been built, ideas that had never made it past the dreaming stage. But they were beautiful and ambitious and full of hope. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. These sketches felt like a piece of her I could carry with me, a tangible connection to the woman who'd given me life, and now, finally, a glimpse into her heart. "Promise me something," she said as we hugged goodbye at the airport. "Anything. Don't let Jessica's anger poison your relationship with your family. She's hurting right now, but that doesn't mean she's right. You belong with the Mitchells. You always have." The flight home gave me time to process everything that had happened over the past week. I thought about Catherine's words, about the love letters that buildings could be, about the family waiting for me back home. By the time we landed, I'd made a decision. Mom was waiting for me at baggage claim, and the relief on her face when she saw me made me realize how worried she'd been. "How are you feeling?" she asked as we drove home. "Different," I said honestly. "But not in a bad way. Meeting Catherine didn't change how I feel about you and Dad. It just added another layer to my story. I'm glad. I was afraid that I'd decide she was my real mother. Mom, you raised me. You were there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, every triumph and failure. Catherine gave me genes and maybe some architectural talent, but you gave me everything else." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you, sweetheart. I love you too." When we got home, I found Jessica sitting on the front porch swing. She looked tired and older than her 35 years, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy for her. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. Mom squeezed my hand and went inside, leaving us alone. I sat down on the swing beside Jessica, maintaining careful distance between us. "I owe you an apology," she said, staring straight ahead. "What I said at the will reading was cruel and unfair." "Yes, it was. I was angry and scared, and I took it out on you. That wasn't right." I waited for her to continue, but she seemed to be struggling with the words. "Finding out that you were Dad's biological daughter." She shook her head. "It confirmed every fear I'd ever had about my place in this family." "What do you mean?" "You were always his favorite, Sarah. Always. Even when we were kids, I could see it. The way he lit up when you walked into a room, the way he listened to your ideas about the business, the way he trusted you with things he never trusted me with." "Jessica, that's not." "It is true," she interrupted. "And now I know why. You're his flesh and blood, and I'm just the daughter who wasn't enough to make him want to stay faithful to Mom." The bitterness in her voice was heartbreaking. This was what she'd taken from Dad's letter. Not the story of two young people making difficult choices, but confirmation that she'd somehow failed to be enough. "Dad never cheated on Mom," I said firmly. "He and Catherine were together before he even met Mom. Their relationship ended before he started dating her. I know that's what the letter said, but nothing. You're choosing to interpret this in the most hurtful way possible, Jessica." "Why?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because it's easier than admitting that maybe Dad loved us both equally, and I spent 35 years being jealous of my sister for no reason. There was the truth she'd been avoiding. He did love us both equally," I said softly. "The will proved that. Equal shares of the business, equal trust in our abilities. The only difference was that he gave me the lake house, and that's because he knew you never cared about it." "You're right. I always hated that place." "So why are you angry about not inheriting it?" Jessica sighed. "I guess I'm not. I guess I'm angry about everything else. About feeling like the inferior daughter my whole life. About learning that my worst insecurities might have been justified. They weren't justified. Jessica, you're brilliant at business in ways I'll never be. Dad trusted you with the operational side of the company because he knew you could handle it. He gave me the creative side because that's where my strengths lie. He didn't love me more. He just loved us differently. I called you illegitimate in front of our entire family. Yes, you did. I humiliated you and made you feel like you didn't belong. Yes, you did. Can you forgive me?" I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. and saw the scared little girl she'd been, always trying to prove she was worthy of love, always afraid she'd come up short. I thought about Catherine's words about not letting Jessica's anger poison our family relationships. "I can forgive you," I said. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll talk to someone. A therapist, a counselor, someone who can help you work through these feelings of inadequacy. Because this isn't really about me or Dad or the inheritance. This is about you not believing you're worthy of love, and that's something you need to fix." Jessica nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I've known for years that I have issues, but it was easier to blame you than to deal with them. And promise me that you'll try to rebuild our relationship. Not go back to the way things were, but build something new and honest. Because I miss my sister, Jessica. I miss having someone who's known me my whole life, who remembers all the same family stories, who can make me laugh until I cry." "I miss that too," she whispered. "And promise me you'll apologize to Mom. What you said about Dad cheating hurt her almost as much as what you said about me." "I already did. I called her yesterday and told her I was sorry. We talked for 2 hours." "Good." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, swinging gently back and forth. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for the first time in weeks I felt like maybe our family could heal from this. "Tell me about Catherine," Jessica said suddenly. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What she's like, what she does, why she gave you up. I want to understand the whole story." So I told her. I told her about Catherine's career, about her illness, about the letters she'd written every year. I told her about the engagement to Dad, about the mutual decision to break up, about the difficult choice to let Robert and Margaret raise me. "She sounds like a good person," Jessica said when I finished. "She is. Do you wish things had been different? Do you wish she'd kept you?" I thought about it carefully before answering. "No. I wish I'd known about her sooner, and I wish she wasn't sick. But I don't wish she'd kept me. Mom and Dad gave me exactly the life I needed. You gave me a sister who challenged me and protected me and drove me crazy in all the best ways. I wouldn't trade any of that." Jessica smiled for the first time since I'd been home. "Even after everything I've put you through? Even after everything you've put me through? I love you, Sarah. I know I have a funny way of showing it sometimes, but I do love you." "I love you too, Jess." As we sat there on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint our childhood home in golden light, I thought about love letters again. Maybe families were love letters too? Messy, complicated, imperfect love letters written by people who were trying their best to care for each other despite their flaws and fears and misunderstandings. We weren't perfect, the Mitchells. We kept secrets and harbored resentments and sometimes said things we didn't mean. But we were family, chosen and biological, legal and emotional, broken and healing. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything.